The slides from this, from Jubi's PowerPoint are in your book.
Yeah. So, you want to make this?
I'm going to change my glass.
There. Sorry. That guy. On your Facebook. Or what you're doing this morning. We'll pay attention. Just waiting for the room.
Class.
Essentially, this presentation is just to let you guys know what I've been up to with my ministry. May not be of any really use or help to others except getting to know me better, but I also, and I say that, actually I hope that doesn't turn out. Because I think a lot of what we have done with our ministry is, I'm proud of a lot of what we've done, what the order has done, recently. And one of the things that I just want to bring the pastoral and also whatever it is. I think that there's a lot of that going on in the order. But just a little background, I'm one of 5 co-founders of the order. We all took vows together a year ago, September 6th. The Order of Jesus Christ Reconciler, or OJCR, has its charism reconciliation. And our motto is Colossians 1:19-20. For in Christ all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to God's self all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. And it's that desire for God to be in relationship with all creation that's sort of at the foundation of our order and the foundation of the charism of reconciliation. So, just very briefly, the vows that we took was the vow of reconciliation, living into that the reality of God's reconciliation or desire for reconciliation. Obedience, which includes chastity, stability, and I don't know even really how to pronounce this word properly, peregrinatio. But basically, the idea that there will be some people who are in houses and in community and in a stable place. There will be other people who, for some reason or other, feel that they're called to kind of a pilgrim, a wandering ministry of reconciliation of some kind. And chastity is not the same thing as, I'm blanking on the other word. Celibacy. I don't even want to think about the word celibacy. So humility is the other. So reconciliation, obedience, and humility are the 3 vows, and we have sub-vows for obedience and humility. The sub-vows of humility are poverty, hospitality, and labor. Again, bivocational, tent making. Hospitality, I'll get to in more detail because that's a really, really important aspect of this whole thing. And poverty is just connected to the tent making aspect. You're never going to make any money doing this. So, on the right side. This is a quote from our rule of order. Claiming nothing for ourselves, but in living and working together under this rule, we give ourselves over to the reality of God's reconciling love. So the idea, again, is that God's doing the work, and we're just participating, we're joining in, because, quite frankly, a lot of what, reconciling all creation is not anything humans can do, right? but we can participate in that reality, and that's part of the order. We have a charism of living into God's work rather than coming up with one specific work of our own, and so that allows for diversity as well in the kind of work we do. So, as I mentioned, there will be some people who are living in houses of the order and other people who are itinerant or wandering. And houses of the order will have three components, and this is to some degree based. The order was, this structure of the order came out of some ministry that was already happening. I'll get into that in a minute, but there are basically three components to it. The coffee cup, I should disclose that this particular set of images was created by somebody who is a coffee brewer and roaster. So the coffee cup symbols discipleship, according to him. But we've come to accept that image as an image of conversation, as an image of interaction. You talk, when you meet with somebody over coffee, you talk with them, coffee talk. The couch is for hospitality, both visiting and sleeping. I think that's a really good symbol. And then there's the church aspect of it, or the oratory in the case, since it's, for you who might not be familiar with the term oratory, the term oratory comes out of monasteries, where there would be a worshiping space in the monastery. It wouldn't be a church proper, it wouldn't be a parish, but local people would come and worship with the monks. And so it was called an oratory. The oratory this is where the monks do their worship, but people are invited to come in and participate. And so we have a core group of people that come, that we minister to where we do church, but we call it oratory because it comes out of the mission of the order. Each of these spaces, the discipleship, which is to some degree meant to represent the living space of the order. So the coffee cup, the conversation, is meant to represent people who live together and influence each other, and live by a rule of life. And so each of these spaces, the community, the intentional community living in the house, the hospitality that community offers, and the oratory that comes out of the house. Each of these spaces oriented towards the work of reconciliation by allowing people the space to encounter and explore and commit to the deep and historic faith of the church. And I'll get a little bit more into the specifics of that. I did want to quote something from the rule of the house. And so, again, there's a rule of the order, the overarching rule of the order, and then each individual house of the order will have its own rule by which that particular community lives. And the community of the Holy Trinity is the community that I am living in Chicago. And we come together sharing real property and other goods, material, spiritual, and personal, so that through the joining of individual resources for the sake of the community, individuals may have not only what they need, but also the means to fully mature and exercise their talents. So, on some level or another, this comes out of what the community of the Holy Trinity actually pre-existed the order and the oratory. And it was founded, somewhat influenced by the whole new monasticism movement, or just sort of the general kind of trend towards intentional community, especially in certain kind of schools. Yes?
Are things owned in common? Like when people come in, do they give up ownership of things? Or is it kind of their...
Well, it's not like the Jesus people where you just don't own anything and you give all your money direct. You know, it's not a shared purse in that sense. It is, everybody contributes to rent, to food. We all you know, we all have a food kitty where we go to do our groceries out of and that kind of thing. And you know, utilities, you know, gas, electric, internet, which is now pretty much foundational.
But you have personal space that you're in, like, you might have your computer or something.
Right. Yeah. People own their own things, but to some degree, that, you know, it depends on the person, I think, on some level as well. I mean, I brought furniture into the house.
Yeah. But everybody else can sit on it.
Right. But also, when if and when, you know, it comes time for me to move on or to found another house, I'm not necessarily going to say that, well, that's my furniture, so you don't have it anymore, okay. Right? But I have that option, right? No one's going to, you know, it's ownership is, the level to which you contribute to the community as a whole, of course, is up to you, beyond the assessment, where it's just the financial reality of living in the space. But the idea behind it is to sort of, well, quite frankly, and I'll get into this a little bit more as well, none of the members of the intentional community could live on their own based on what they're making, you know, in this world. I mean, that's part of the problem, right? You know, it's not the days when an individual's salary, depending on what individual you are, can support you by yourself is sort of over. You know, I mean, most households have kind of 2 incomes at least, right? You know, even married couples usually both work. In our case, no single one of us could possibly live. None of us have the resources to live on our own. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Right. Which is not to say that for some reason or other that could change, and you know, we certainly have had members of the community who could have lived on their own if they chose to, but then oftentimes they will contribute more than the other people because they believe in what we're doing and they're willing to help support other people living in that community. So on some level or another, there are very good economic reasons to do this. But it also comes out of a foundational Christian faith. There is a rule of life. Everybody agrees to live by this rule of life. Which is not to say that, I mean, there have been members of the community that aren't Christian. In fact, there's currently a member of the community that's not a Christian. In fact, is basically an atheist. But they believe in what we're doing, and they agreed to live by the rule of life. And on some level, that includes praying together. And so we've had really interesting ways of dealing with that. On some level or another, we do like morning and evening prayer on a you know, fairly traditional basis. But when we had one member of the community who was very strongly an atheist, we had some prayer sessions which were just silence. You know, just silent meditation to accommodate. And those are the ones that he was more comfortable coming in. But again, it was just sort of this shared spirituality or shared sacred space was at least a part of the foundation of the community, and part of what keeps it together beyond just signing an agreement, right? And then up until a recent events that caused the community to sort of pare down to its basic membership, there was, when we lived in a larger space, basically, there was always a spare bedroom for people who needed, you know, that hospitality sense, that sense of hospitality. The ideal is to have like a spare bedroom for people who, for some reason or another, find themselves that they don't have anywhere to go for like until they get back on their feet, or they, you know, or they need temporary housing or something like that. Like we always, like, the ideal is to have sort of not just the extra plate on the table, but the extra bed in the house. Right. In the last year and a half, or actually I guess 2 years now, we have added to the work of the community so that there was the Church of Jesus Christ Reconciler, so I'll tell you a little background about that. The Church of Jesus Christ Reconciler was originally an ecumenical experiment. There was a Baptist minister, an Episcopal priest, and a Congregationalist minister who got together and said, let's actually do ecumenical worship. Let's not do some kind of vague, non-denominational thing, but actually sort of have a space where different flavors of Christianity can all be sort of worshipped in the same space, but and together. And there was, that gathered the original, that attracted the original congregation to the church, because it was, and that a lot of that original group was sort of the typical people who had been burned by the church, but you know they saw this as somehow different. You know, partly just because of the personalities involved in the leadership on some level or another. Just like clearly, like let's see, like Larry is this total goth. You know, they're not traditional. Like people would go like, "You're a Christian? Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me." Because like they have this idea of Christian, and on some level or another, even from the beginning, there was a obvious. This is not your grandmother's Christianity, kind of aspect of it going on. So eventually, though, the Episcopal Church pulled out over a controversy over who gets to get the baptism in their records. And the Baptist minister went to the West Coast to get his doctorate, and I kind of left Larry holding the bag until I came along and became the associate pastor, and so the two of us were sort of doing the church at that point, but it had already been sort of, back when Larry was holding it by himself before I came along, the idea of creating an order to sort of tie the house and the worship community together was in the works.
Wasn't that the same name as Jeffrey's church?
No.
No.
It's Christ the Healer.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah, no, Jesus Christ Reconciler is long before. So I'm going to get into some of the individual aspects of the three components of a house of the order. So the discipleship house. This is the actual. And again, the discipleship house, that's actually a title carried over from the Assembly of God minister who was talking, who was presenting to his higher-ups. I don't even know what they're called in the Assembly of God, actually. And so discipleship house is language that they would understand. But basically, it's the intentional community. And so, as I mentioned before, there's a basic rule of life, and people, and the idea is that it's a space where people can get more than just a place where people who wouldn't be able to survive on their own can live together, but a place where through living rules of life and community meals and weekly meetings where we check in with each other. There's a certain amount of, it's not really a spiritual direction per se, but it's that, it has that kind of a feel of just sort of, let's, where is everybody at? What are they doing? How can we support you?
So like in a township, Accountability. Accountability, thank you.
Yeah, there's some, yeah, exactly, there's some accountability there as well. And so members of the community, ideally, because anytime you're in a community, you're going to have people who don't get along, right? And so that becomes an interesting experiment in reconciliation on the ground, right? So that's, but again, because of, the idea, again, even back at the earliest stages, is that we're, members of the order in particular will be doing some kind of reconciling work in the world, whatever that looks like. It's going to look like different for different people. I mean, for some people it's a social justice aspect, and other people it's art, and I'll get to some of that as well. For myself, being part of the intentional community allows me to work for the Chicago Women's Health Center because because they can't pay me a whole lot. Right? And so this is my tent making, so to speak. But it's also like not enough to live on my own. Actually, I'm right there. Kind of hidden, but I like this picture because it just really shows you that the collective this is a collective as well, so it's really nice. I work in a collective, I live in a collective. I have such a comment about it.
So, you say communist?
Well, in the broader sense of the word, community.
You and both like.
I wasn't saying that. Exactly. Wasn't saying that was a pejorative.
I don't think, personally, I don't necessarily think of communism pejorative, but that's something. I'm definitely a socialist for sure. I have some problems with Marx, but this isn't the time to get into that. But let me tell you a little bit about the Chicago Women's Health Center because I think it's important because it's in fact, I think the fundamental struggle with the Chicago Women's Health Center is a struggle of trying to do just work in an unjust world. It's a feminist collective. It started in the 70s with the whole, women need to take control of their health and their bodies out of the hands of the male doctors who, to some degree, well, I mean, the fact that the recent Affordable Care Act had to include laws saying you have to cover women's health tells you that even now, the level at which people actually give a shit about women's health, right? It has to be law to cover it. So but at a certain point in its history, it went from just women to women and trans people, and then of course, we don't turn anybody away because there are certain services, I mean, certainly no cisgender male is going to need the gynecological services. However, we do have alternative medicine, acupuncture, like massage therapy, that kind of thing, and we have counseling as well, and certainly we don't turn anybody away. But the primary sort of mission statement is the empowerment of women and trans people. So it's a gender justice-based organization, and a lot of how we do healthcare is collaborative and compassionate. We have hour-long visits. We don't have 10-minute visits, right? Which to some degree limits our income, right? If you can do like 6 visits in an hour versus 1 visit in an hour, you're going to bring in more income. But that's not the kind of healthcare we want to do. We want to do healthcare where people get to actually have a voice in the care of their own bodies and what matters to them. So again, on some level or another, this is how I express social justice and do some trans activism because it's transpositive, and I've actually, through the center, participated in some important work on trans health in general for the Chicago area. And so I would not be able to afford to work here if it wasn't for the support I get in the House of the Order. So it really does, again, this is just an example of ways in which it supports justice work in ways that otherwise couldn't happen. Now, that's Larry, my co-pastor, and he is painting an icon at an art fair. He's writing an icon more particularly. And so, I mean, Larry is like pastor of the oratory, Abba of the order, prior of the house, and none of that is paid work. You know, so he really does rely heavily. I mean, he has his tent making job as well, but he relies, you know, really heavily on the support of the community because the whole structure of the house needs to have somebody kind of
Oversee.
You know, just for pure administration. But he also is an artist, and one of from the get-go, the house, the community of the Holy Trinity has supported artists.
Where are the kids from?
Well, there was an art fair.
Girl there and that.
They were just hanging out there. Although this kid actually used to be a member of the house.
Okay.
She at one time was a member of the house, and that family has moved on to live on their own. But they still come to the oratory. They're still connected to the community. And through Larry's art, of course, Larry, you know, a lot of people sort of come to him and say, "Wait a minute, oh, what's going on here? Why are you painting this Christian stuff? Like, is it ironic? Is it?" And he's like, "No, actually, it's not."
It's a long tradition.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is Larry's wife, Katie.
Okay.
She is a Jeff Award-winning costume designer. But on some level or another, I feature less for that than for the fact that she is, at this point in time, the one lay member of the order. She took vows of the order to help support everybody. But as a lay person, it became an interesting structure, which again was sort of set into the order, to the rule of the order, that each member of the, because it's an ecumenical order, each member of the clergy needs to go to the people that they're responsible to sort of get permission to join the order. So it's not, you know, it's not just like you can. The idea is that part of the ecumenical nature of the order is that each individual denomination gives approval to a member of their denomination being part of the order. In the case of a layperson, it will be their home parish or their home congregation where they will go to and say, you know, do you support me in becoming a member of the order? So the idea, again, is just that's on some level or another a major piece of how the ecumenical nature of the order gets together, because each denomination is on some level or another participating through each member, as opposed to just somebody coming in on their own without having any kind of affiliation.
Jubi,
Yeah.
do you have like professed and oblate and associate kind of memberships in here?
There will be, yes, as people, you know, there are a number of people who are interested in joining the order, but they kind of wanted to wait until it was founded. So there are the five founding members all joined at the same time, and you know, the first year was just really kind of establishing ourselves in this, you know, so. But yes, you do. There is the rule does structure a way of entry and you know, people who are interested in, you know, not dissimilar to some of what we were talking about yesterday, about training.
Jubi,
Yeah.
what do you do with a spiritual but not religious layperson who wants to join the order? She has no, or he has no religious authority to give
Well,
permission or approval.
if they want to join the house, the intentional community, they don't need any religious affiliation. But the order is very specifically Christian. And so the order is not as open. Like, the hospitality aspect of the house of the order is open to all, but the order itself is a Christian order. It's an ecumenical Christian, specifically Christian order.
Made up of which denomination?
Huh?
Made up of which denomination?
Whichever denomination want to participate. Currently, UAC, the Congregationalist, and Assembly of God. And Kate is an Episcopalian, and so her, even though she's not clergy, but her home parish, you know, she was working with her home parish in order to sort of get discernment about joining the order. So you have lay people, but they do have to be Christian to be actually a member of the order. Not everybody in the house is going to be a member of the order.
Okay, because I was wondering more about the atheists.
Yeah, no, I mean the members of the order will be
Of the Christian.
right, and they will be the foundation of the house, but the house itself is
Okay.
hospitality to all.
Okay.
I hope that's clear.
Do the clergy members ask their denomination for financial support?
Because we're on some level or another, all of us are to some degree outside of the normal. None of us are doing the normal trajectory of a member of the various denominations. I'll get to Chris and Elaine in a minute. Chris and Elaine are the Assembly of God pastors. They were originally in Michigan to try and for a church planting, but for various reasons, some of them political, that couldn't happen. And also just their own kind of views around the LGBT community and such doesn't really jive with the rest of their church. So they're really kind of, you know, they're members of the clergy, but they're really not, you know, and they've gotten approval to participate in this, but in part that's because they're not in that tradition, they're not part of that traditional structure. They're a little bit outside of that. And the same with Larry. I mean, because on some level or another, what we're doing there, most denominations don't have a structure to incorporate the kind of